Can I step away to turn on another light?
They can hear you. Okay, we will get started in about 3 minutes. We still have people entering. Thank you so very much for joining us this evening for this very important conversation. And she's back. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to get started. Again, thank you so very much. I am Dr. Stephanie Powell. I am the Western Area National Trends and Services Chair. With us, we have Carmen Mayo, who is the Arts Facet Chair, and then, of course, our guest and star of the show, Pamela Samuels Young. For those of you that don't know a lot about human trafficking, I just want to talk about it just for just 1 second. And the fact that when we look at human trafficking and we look especially at human sex trafficking, please note that unfortunately it really hits the African American community, and that 40% of victims of human trafficking are African American women and girls. Keep in mind that we, in terms of African American women and girls, only make up 15.5% of the total population. So this is a crisis. This is an issue that really hits our community in so many different ways. And the ways that it impacts the victims can be horrendous and lifelong. That's why having conversations like these help to build awareness. It helps to get people motivated. And what you're going to find is that just like the name of the book, this could be anybody's daughter. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Carmen Mayo.
Good evening, Lynx. It's so good to see everyone. Tonight really comes from Lynx Stephanie Powell's vision, and we want to thank her for creating this space and bringing us together. Stephanie also invited her good friend Pamela Samuels Young, and we're so glad Pamela could join us and share her work with us tonight. From the art side, we often think about storytelling as a way to help people connect, but this conversation is bigger than the arts alone. It's about real experiences, real people, and issues that are happening in our communities right now. Anybody's Daughter reminds us that these stories are personal and they matter. This is exactly the kind of thoughtful conversation Lynx is known for, one that asks us to listen, reflect, and stay engaged. Thank you all for being here and leaning into this important discussion. So take it away, Pamela.
Well, before we get to Pamela, and I thank you, no, that's okay. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that because even and I'm speaking to the links right now, this is something to think about in terms of when you're working with young people, introducing this book, then having a conversation with experts or with survivors. Just remember, though, when you're working with victims, or I'm sorry, when you're working with victims or survivors of human trafficking, I should say, and you ask them to speak, make sure that you give them an honorarium because telling their story can sometimes be re-traumatizing. Also, I would suggest that, especially when you're working with young people, to make sure that you have counselors available in case the conversation triggers things that might be going on in their household or things that might be going on with them. And so the way this is going to go, Pam and I are going to have a conversation. Please feel free while this webinar is going on to put in any questions that you have. Carmen will be monitoring the Q&A, and we will be answering questions once my conversation is over with Pamela. I also would like to acknowledge that we have some guests or some non-links that are joining us tonight as well. And I hope this gives you an opportunity of what we do as links in the Western area and throughout the nation of what we do in order to build awareness and to work within our community. And so with that, now we will actually begin our conversation. So Pam, tell us, when did you publish this book? And tell us a little bit of what the book is about. Some people have actually read it that are watching us right now. Some have not read it, but will probably want to read it after this conversation. So just kind of give us an idea, if you don't mind, of when you published it and what is the storyline?
The book was published in 2013, and I wrote it mostly into 2012. And it's about a young girl who is, unbeknownst to her mother, because her mother doesn't even know she has a Facebook page, because back then Facebook was the rage, not Instagram, right? TikTok. And she's communicating with a boyfriend that she's not supposed to have, or she thinks she is. She's 12 years old, and she sneaks off to meet him, and she is pulled into the world of child sex trafficking. And that kind of thing actually happens. And at some point I can share, I want to share a story, a personal story about someone I know who was pulled into trafficking that happened long after I wrote the book. But I called it Anybody's Daughter because I realized that it could happen to anybody's daughter. And the story is about how her uncle, because her father was deceased, and how her uncle, who's like a guy of the streets, really pounds the pavement and determines he's going to find who has her and get her back. But in the meantime, I wanted to communicate the real world of what happens in this situation. Did a lot of reading and talking to people. And I think one of the best compliments I got for the book is that I'd given it to a friend who works with girls who've been trafficked. I'd given several copies, and she had the girls who were actually trafficked read it. And they came back to her and asked her, where had I been trafficked? Because they thought that they didn't understand how I could have written that book and not have experienced what they had gone through. So that was the best compliment that I could have expected or ever received for a book.
What was the name of the organization? Do you remember?
It was Reverend Deborah Mann's group, and I can't think of what it is now, but she was out there rescuing girls, taking girls in, and she was the one who had given copies to some of her girls, and they came back and asked her, where was I trafficked? What track was I on? And that was breathtaking.
Even though, and I know that that was breathtaking because you're absolutely right, but that holds testament to how real this book actually is, how real it is, and that you were able to write this, but you were never trafficked. So in this book, and I know it describes FaceTime, it just kind of shows you even now today of how easy it is because it's still happening. Now we just have more platforms because we do have victims that are being recruited off of Snapchat, Instagram. I think I read a stat that said like 55% of victims of human trafficking say that they got recruited off of one of these platforms, and that while they were trafficked while they were in school. So I know you talked a little bit about what motivated you to do this work. What's astonishing is that when you did it in 2013, people really weren't talking about it.
Yeah.
Right. And so I just find it interesting. How did you develop your character the way that you did?
Um, and it's one of the few books I've written where, oh my God, things just really fell into place. Because I was having a conversation with a friend. We were having lunch. I remember exactly where we were. And he was just kind of threw out there, these gangs, they're not traffic, they're not, they're trafficking girls now. They're not into drugs like they used to be. And I'm like, what are you talking about trafficking girls? He said, no, you go look it up, go Google it, blah, blah, blah. He was going on and on about how gangs were taking girls, taking them out of state and trafficking them and locking them in rooms and having them have sex with men. And it just seemed, I mean, I didn't, it was like, how can that be happening and nobody's talking about it? So I went home that night and I Googled it, trafficking and that, and it's like all these articles came up. I mean, it's like boom, boom, boom. And it was shocking to me that nobody was talking about it. And I something it mentioned about being the social media being part of it. And I don't know, the story idea just came to me about a girl from Compton. I'm from Compton, a kid of a single parent, and she thinks she's talking to somebody on Facebook, and she gets snatched into this. And so from there, from that conversation with him, I just started reading everything I could on it. There were some books I read written by uh, girls who had been trafficked. There were research articles. There was a lot out there. There's tons more now. And I was able to see the shift from treating the girls. They used to treat young girls as prostitutes, not as victims. When I started researching this, I am so glad to see that change. Because now, if you're under 18 and you're picked up for trafficking, you're treated like the victim that you are. And I like to tell people there is no such thing as a child prostitute. They are sexually exploited children. If a grown man in a school setting is sleeping with a student, he's thrown under the jail, and she is a victim. That is no different. And I don't think people understand. Well, oh, but they're out there, they're walking the track. You don't understand. Many of these girls are runaways. They're in abusive situations at home because of things that somebody in their family has done to them, and then they run and find this pimp who in the beginning is acting like he's their friend, or I'll help you, and that Romeo pimp who is trying to be their friend, and next thing you know, I'm gonna get your hair done, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that, I'll take care of you, don't worry. And then a month later, well, I did this for you, I need you to go out and do this for me. It's no big thing. And it's just a whole cycle.
Yeah, yeah, and I like how in the book, and that's why I think this book is so important because you make the character to be anybody's daughter. Like you mentioned the fact, and of course I like the fact that the book is based in Los Angeles, but you mentioned the fact how she goes to this mega church and how the person who she thinks is her age that she's talking to, everything that she said, I go to church, I go to school, him playing as though he is her age says the same things as well. So it really depicts what that grooming process actually looks like. Because in the book, how old is he? He's pretending he's her age, right?
Right. But
But
she's actually talking to a grown man. She's not talking, there's no kid even exists.
right,
And a lot of them do that.
right. And
So
yeah, no, absolutely. And so I think that's the important part of this is that she thinks she's talking to someone who is her age, but she's talking to a grown man and does not know. We won't tell you everything in the book, but that's really important, even to the point where he picks her up and he says, my uncle is going to pick you up. Remember, there is no teenage boy.
right.
It's him. Why that's so significant, and that's why I found this book to be so captivating and how it correctly mirrors real life, because I have had cases like that. I had a case that came out of, for those of you that are from LA, and those of you that don't know me, I did 30 years with the Los Angeles Police Department, and I worked a vice unit, and transitioned after I retired and assisted adult victims of human trafficking. I had a case that came out of Southwest in which the same thing happened. She meets this guy online who she thinks is her age. He comes and picks her up. And when I told Pam this story originally, I was like, you didn't even know that that had happened. So again, just how the two mirror. So he drives, and interesting enough, Pam, she lived in Palmdale, Lancaster, just like the person did in your book. Like, how could it align so perfectly and so tragically? So he drives from LA, he picks her up, tells her that they're going to go meet the person who she thinks she's talking to online. So these two grown men pick her up. She's in the back seat. Here's what's interesting. They get stopped by CHP on the way from Palmdale to Lancaster. Now, keep in mind, depending on traffic, that could be an hour's drive, depending on where you're going in LA. So this is an hour out of Los Angeles, pick up in Palmdale, hour back. CHP stops him in the interim on the 14th. Um, the guy ends up getting a ticket, believe it or not, and now they're on their way. I don't think the officers, and that's why training law enforcement is so important. I don't think they keyed in that there was anything wrong because remember, at this time, she thinks these guys are taking her to meet this person that she met online. Long story short, she ends up in a house in South Central LA for 2 days, unable to leave. She finally is able to escape naked and goes into the neighborhood to a neighbor house, and that's how she ends up being rescued. So I'm only using this example just to show you that these things really do happen. And then the fact that it's not just those kids over there, that this is also happening to high school students, kids that are in college. And so when you did this, why did you not make her like a foster child or someone or a child that has gotten caught up in the juvenile justice system? Why did you make this someone that went to church? What were you
because
trying to say?
it's happening. And I think that we have this false sense of security, like, oh, I know what my child is doing. I No, you don't. No, you do. I mean, your children are at school. Your children are. Well, my kid doesn't have a social media page. Brianna's mother in the book didn't think she had a social media page either. And let me share an example. I was more than a year after the book came out. One of my closest friends, okay, calls me and says, I think my niece is missing. And the niece lived with her in Pasadena, and said that I think she's something's wrong because I went on I think she may have been trafficked. I'm like, why are you going to jump to that just because she's missing? And we talked a little bit about it. Anyway, I turned her on to somebody in the world trafficking world who went on this girl's Facebook page and in 5 minutes saying the guy she's talking to is a known trafficker. As it turns out, this guy who had been communicating her for weeks as she's complaining about all the rules in the house and things she doesn't like, sent her a ticket. She gets on a plane at LAX and goes to Miami because this guy is telling her she's going to be a model. My friend who really has custody of the niece finds out where it is. Now, the only issue here is that child had recently turned 18, which makes it a whole different world. But anyway, she had her personal friends, her law enforcement friends, go to this house, knock on the door, and try to talk. Are you okay? I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm 18. I can do what I want. I'm gonna be a model. They asked her, would you come down the drive? Because the guy was standing right there, all bold. Would you come down the driveway and talk to me away from him? She did that, and she again and exchanged the same posture. They had family members call her. They tried to reach out to her, but they thought about kidnapping her, having family members go down there and take her out. But again, she's 18. If she had been 17 and a half, 17 and 10 months, it would have been a whole different story. To this day, that girl has not returned home. I've actually seen her porn page. So she's in a whole nother life. And what I'd like everybody on this webinar to do, if you have a teen, male and female, or a preteen, to watch the Netflix series Hot Girls Wanted. The guy I'm talking about is the guy in that series. There's only one scene where my friend's niece is actually in there. Luckily she doesn't do any of the speaking roles, but there's a couch scene and there's a pool scene where that child is in that video. And it shows how they manipulate these girls. Because they're now one thing about him, he always he only he doesn't deal with underage girls. He gets them just as they're turning 18 when there's nothing he can do with them. But he's looking for the most naive girls. He'll get them from Iowa, whatever else. He's communicating. He's looking through combing through Facebook pages and reading women who are griping about their girls who are griping about their parents and all those things. So it's very it's very, very important. And people ask me, well, what do I do? How do I keep my girl safe? Because you can't be with her 24 hours a day. It's important that your daughter is raised with self-esteem. She should not hear the first time that she's beautiful should not be from a pimp. That she's loved should not be from a pimp. There should be some open communications. Nobody talks to their parents about everything. I don't, you don't. So when people tell me I know everything, I talk to my daughter. No, you don't. Make sure there's a sister, there's a cousin. I talk to my aunt about things more than I talk to my mother. So that you may not be that, and you may be that source, but you may not be. You may not, because if your daughter knows that you don't want her talking to this guy or some guy she met, she may not tell you, but she may tell somebody. And like I tell people, if your child has a cell phone, the predator is talking to your child in your house. Okay, he can reach your child in the house. One of my friends who's an attorney, a criminal attorney, had a case where this child was trafficked and sitting in the bedroom. Her parents in the front, two parents in the front room, didn't know, and she would go out and do stuff and then come back home. They didn't know. They didn't know, and they're stunned and shocked. Well, how did you tell us? We don't always tell things to our parents. We're afraid, and then we get deeper, then we get more afraid. So just be the adult, and recognize that it's a different world than the world we grew up in.
And I so agree with you on everything you said. That self-esteem part is so important. And think about when we send our kids off to school that have been so protected. And you're absolutely right. One of those things being that if they can't come to you, to go to another trusted adult. And let me say about the self-esteem part. There is a book, you're just supposed to always know your enemy, so to speak. But and since I advocate for victims of human trafficking, I read a book that a well-known pimp wrote. The one thing that he says in there is, if I cannot find a weakness, I will create one. And that's how I get them to do everything that I need them to do, because he finds that vulnerability. I think it's important to note that the average age of entry for human trafficking is between the age of 12 and 14 years old. And for African American girls, it's 11. But please note that once they turn 19, or 18, just like you said, that it doesn't stop. It continues. I've worked with the adults, and so I'm working with a 23-year-old that started being pimped out at the age of 13. And so when you think about that adult that's 23, that might still be in the life, might still be with a pimp, think of, first of all, her innocence is lost. Think about the fact that now she didn't get a chance to finish high school. Think about the fact that she may have gotten arrested a few times and now has an arrest record that is going to keep her from getting a job. And if she has committed some type of felony and she's a convicted felon, now not only is employment going to be a hard thing to do, but living. If you are you can't get on Section 8 if you have a felony conviction. So you could see how this really can devastate someone's world, not to mention the fact that they show about 90% were molested as children. So you're dealing with one individual with multi-victimizations. And so therefore, therapy is going to be very important. And so that's where the nonprofit organizations really come into play to be able to make this person whole. I have to commend you, Pam, because by trade, you were an attorney. To talk to us about how did you go
Mm.
from being an attorney? And let me mention that anybody's daughter actually won the NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Fiction and was a top 10 pick by the margins, the book clubs for at-risk teens. So here you were a corporate attorney, weren't you?
Mhm.
How, how did you go from being a corporate attorney to a
Um,
well-honored author? Because
I
I
like
want
to,
to be you when I grow up. You know,
oh
I
yeah,
always tell you
right.
that.
I like to say I owe my career to John Grisham. Because when I was practicing law and I worked at a large corporate law firm when I started working on this book. I worked at O'Melveny and Myers. And my stress reliever was reading novels. And I loved reading stories about lawyers, legal thrillers and mysteries. And I loved everything John Grisham wrote, but I would always close the book with a sense of dissatisfaction because there were nobody in his books who looked like me unless they were to defend it. There were no women attorneys, there were no black attorneys. And one day, I just said to myself, I'm gonna write a book and it's gonna contain some people who look like me. And that idea kept percolating until one morning I had anybody's daughter wasn't the first book I wrote. It was, I don't know, fourth or fifth, but I had a case involving sexual harassment where the guy was fired for sexual harassment, and I defended the company. And he claimed he didn't do it, but the jury was out, what, 30 minutes, but he did it. But anyway, so I took that case and decided to write a novel, a legal thriller about it. And I can still remember getting up 4 o'clock in the morning to write before work for that. And as I sat down to try to put this story together, it was instantaneous that I had discovered my passion. I love it. It was like, oh my God, this is it. I like the practice of law, but it wasn't what I felt then. So for the next couple of years, I got up early before work. I wrote after work. I volunteered for out of town assignments, so I'd be away from family. I wrote on weekends. I wrote in trains. I wrote in the airport, and I published this. I finished this book, which I just thought was a masterpiece, and it was not, because I didn't really know anything about fiction writing. I didn't know about plot and structure and all those things. And I had to learn those things because I was finished it and was giving it to my friends to read, and they were like, "Oh, girl, I'll get back to you later. I got to go," because they didn't want to tell me that of how bad it was. But I did not give up. I continued to work on another book, and in the interim, I had taken a one-day writers course at the UCLA Writers Program, where the instructor said, take a book that's like yours and outline it so you understand the structure. And that was a light bulb moment for me because when I outlined John Grisham's The Firm, it's just like I got it. What I understood what I was doing wrong because I was trying to be Toni Morrison and talk about the shadow on the wall for 4 hours, for 4 pages, and be literary and whatever. I'm a former TV news writer before law school, so I'm more plot driven and more quick and to the point. So but that was one of the catalysts that kind of got me going. So even though I had spent 3 years on that first book that nobody wanted to read, and then I wrote a second book, that was the book that got attention and it got me an agent and sold. And here I am, 16 books later.
That's really outstanding. I mean, like, I don't even know what to say to that. But what I will say to that is the same thing that you just outlined. I remember when I was at Journey Out, and one of the things that we did at Journey Out is that we worked counseling groups with the survivors. And Pam volunteered to come and
Mm.
talk to remember that? and
Hmm.
to come and talk to the survivors about how they could go about telling their story. Because there were some in our groups that wanted to be authors, that wanted to tell their story. And and I think it's important for them to be able to tell their own story. And so I just had to remind you of that. She volunteered. We were on Crenshaw back in the day, and she would come and talk to them. They were so appreciative that one, they were talking to a real live author that looked like them. And they were so appreciative that you took the time to do that. And so that kind of leads to my next question is where do you see the role of literary arts in fighting human trafficking?
I think it's important because because I've had so many people tell me they didn't know about this until they read my book. So I feel like I'm opening eyes, which is why I put so much effort into making it authentic. And from there, other books that I've written about other topics, I wanted to make sure what I was writing about was realistic and educational. Um, so I wanted because I feel like if I can present this topic and you can learn something from it, that you can take it to your in your world, and be impactful. And I think that has happened because I've had a lot of people read it, and a lot of people have ended up doing Zooms like this or inviting me to speak to their groups. And African American women are so connected and so involved in their community. And I think I've reached thousands of people through them, through their various organizations that they're involved in.
I've had people say that, um, as they're reading this book, there's points in it where it becomes a little bit too much, in terms of what's going on with the character. What do you say to people when they get to that point in the book? Because I won't tell you what happens at the end,
Mhm.
although except for the fact that you need to read it to the end.
Mhm.
But what is your suggestion to people where it just becomes a bit too much?
It's interesting because I didn't think it, I held back, okay? Because I remember sitting down and thinking that I had to write a scene with this child being raped, right? And I couldn't do it. And I was like, I cannot write that, right? And then I'm sitting there, I'm stuck, and I'm thinking, how am I going to write a book that's realistic where girls been trafficked and she never gets raped? And so this was early on in the process, and I'm thinking I can't, I just couldn't do it. And I came up with the idea to make the story over a 5-day period. So then you can believe that they never. So all these things happen, things almost happen. So I tell people I don't think it's too much because she never gets raped. So it gets to the point where you think that's going to happen, and then I pull back because I myself could I so I I said if you think what is there now is too much, think about what the girls are going through. Okay, because I do believe when you finish the book that it will be impactful, and you're going to think differently the next time you see a child or a young adult or a grown woman walking on a track. There's a history behind that, and I would hope that as a lot of times I see all the concern and care for underage girls. There needs to be equal concern and care for the adult women who are out there. They were brought into this in most cases in their teens, in their early years. And it's just not so easy to well, why can't they just walk away and do what? I know grown women who've stayed with abusive men, grown women with good jobs who stayed with abusive men. So what's a 14-year-old child going to do? Or what's a 20-year-old young woman going to do who that's all she's ever known? It's a process to walk out of that. So I would hope people would lose some of the judgment. And again, I want to go back to that Netflix series Hot Girls Wanted. It is worth watching. It's the first episode. There are two of them. but the first one, Hot Girls Wanted, and you look at that guy, that little dorky little white guy who ends up pulling all these girls from all over the country to quote unquote be a model. Then they're being sexual models, and then it's a sad world we live in.
And and it's still happening, where they are recruiting women across the country,
Mm.
especially those that are addicted, have substance abuse issues,
Mm.
and recruit them into the pornography world. And when they reach into that pornography world, things are happening like racialized porn, in which every stereotype that you can believe is playing itself out.
Mm.
And of course, if they're bringing somebody from back east, bringing them to a place like LA, because Los Angeles is the capital for the making of pornography, in terms of pornography film sets. She may want to leave, but where she's going to go? She can't go. um, she's not allowed to go. And I wrote an article in Newsweek on racialized porn with a very good friend of mine, Dr. Carolyn West. And I could not believe the comments that we received that were horrible. And it just gave you just an idea of the society that we live in. And I'm so glad you brought that up about the importance that the literary arts come into play. And that's why we brought our facet chair, Carmen, into this collaboration of having this workshop or this webinar today. Because what we do as Links is we are encouraged as it pertains to human trafficking. Look at the laws, look at the legislation that's happening in your state or that are happening locally. Work with victims or I'm sorry, work with victim organizations, find out where their gaps and what their needs are. And so um, um, having the public or the community read books like yours and to have those conversations is a part of that awareness piece, right? As we're talking about legislation, let me talk about California for just 1 second. So California is the number one state as it pertains to human trafficking, and Houston is the number one city. Um, AB 379 is a law that just came into place, and it started to be enforced January the 1st of this year. And what that basically does is that if someone is arrested for soliciting a minor for the purposes of commercial sex, it is now a felony. First of all, to think about the
Oh my
fact
God, that's
that
good.
it was a misdemeanor all this time. This is for a minor. So this just goes to show you, remember the stats of who the victims are? The fact that a minor could be solicited for the purposes of commercial sex, for that to be a misdemeanor is crazy in and of itself. So now it's a felony. What they've also done under that same passing of that law is that they have upped the fines to about 1,000, 1,500 for the sex buyer if he's buying a an adult. What
Mm.
Oakland did is they went to their local politicians and said,
Wait,
let's
who
move
did?
that fine.
Did Oakland?
Oakland,
Oh.
California
Hmm.
went to their legislators, said we need to move that fine up to $4,000. Why that is significant is because money from those fines can go to nonprofit organizations that are assisting victims of human trafficking. That's why it's significant. One of the things that we have to think about when we talk about legislation, and you're looking at legislation in your particular area, what are the laws and what are the laws that need to be strengthened to go after, and we call that the demand. going after the sex buyers, going after the demand, because that is what is also going to help in I don't know if things could get to a point where it completely eradicates it, but it will slow it down because I can tell you that the sex buyers that I arrested, the majority were married. The majority of them had jobs. I've arrested everyone from the gardener to the attorney, to the sergeant, to the police officer, to the firefighter. So when people like that, when their jobs are being threatened and they're going to get hit with a felony, it's going to make them think about that. Now, you talked about the other books that you've written. Um, what other books have you written that have addressed issues that people really needed to be aware of? Like one of the ones, and you and I had talked about this, and this was great because and this still happens today, when a young lady is dating a young man and he says to her, and this doesn't only happen to young folks, this happens with adults as well. Send me that pic. And you send them that pic that you would not either send to your kids, or if you're a kid, that you wouldn't send to your grandparent, in the thoughts that it's only going to be between the two of you. What you need to know is that once you push send, you have no more control of that. And so now it goes on the internet. Now it goes on to Pornhub. Now it goes into places you don't want your picture seen. So let's go back to the young people. So young ladies, and if you guys have seen that movie on Netflix, Forever, it addresses this exact issue. Girl sends a picture to a boy that she thinks is her boyfriend. She trusts him. Well, to take that even further, if that boy shares that picture with the football team or with someone else, now he is in danger of contributing to child pornography. As a result of that, tell us about the book that you wrote that has to do with that type of subject matter, and why did you write that one?
That one's called Abuse of Discretion, where a young kid has a picture of on his phone of a girl who's shown some body part, and he's accused of distributing child pornography because once you send it, you have distributed child pornography. And again, I've just known attorneys who sitting with parents and they're trying to explain to them what's happening to their children, that they've been charged and that they were, and many jurisdictions have treated them just like an adult, you know. Luckily, many jurisdictions, California included, have now backed off of that and are not treating these kids the same. I mean, there are going to be repercussions, particularly when it's not just between two people and somebody shares it with the whole school. Um, but 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 if you send a picture of an underage, a naked picture of an underage person, that is child pornography. Despite the fact that we're boyfriend and girlfriend, we have just distributed child pornography. And again, I can tell you another situation from a personal experience. A friend of mine's nephew, a high school student, sent a pic. Him and his girlfriend were exchanging pictures. Okay, now she's Latina, he's African American. The Latina father was not happy that their daughter was dating this black guy. Anyway, took her phone, found those pictures on his phone, went to the police. So now the police are talking about charging him with distributing child pornography. But one thing the father didn't take into account is that the first pictures that were sent were the daughter sending them to him. So then now they're both in a situation of facing distributing child pornography. Then now all of a sudden the father wants to back off. But kids need to understand that there are consequences for that. But and we don't, we do our kids a disservice because we know it's like we're so afraid to tell them stuff because we don't tell them, because if they don't know, I've done events where I play a video of the news story of these kids who are in trouble for sharing naked pictures. They didn't know they were distributing child pornography. They thought they were doing something consensual. So we don't talk frankly enough with our kids about the dangers they face because they know, and they know way more than we do, than we think we know, and they know more than us in some situations. So that book, Abuse of Discretion, and another book that I wrote, Failure to Protect, about kids being bullying and the bullying epidemic, particularly in the African American community, the bullying epidemic leading to child suicide. And nobody's talking about that enough. I mean, it's just stunning. If you put in child suicide on Google, I think you're going to be stunned at how many African American faces crop up. And the majority of them are going to be under the age of 12. I don't understand why yet, but it's another epidemic that we just aren't talking about.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because there is a bill that just passed the Senate. It has bipartisan support. It's going to go into the House, but here's a legislation type of thing that we as Links and the community could get behind, and it's the Kids Online Safety Act.
Mm.
Kids Online Safety Act. So that is in the process. And what that does is that it forces these platforms to have more parental control, to be able to really make sure that our kids are safe online, because it's up to the platform to be able to do that. And then I always encourage parents to really do your research, and you need to understand these online platforms as well. Last question for you. What are you working on?
Mm.
And how does one get the book, Anybody's Daughter? And for those of you that have not read it. And then once you answer that question, Carmen, we will go to you if there's any questions in the chat. So while she is answering that question, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. So how do we get this book, and what are you working on?
Everywhere books are sold. I mean, Amazon, and I have a great the audio book is narrated by a really great guy. He's the way he just took that story. I was just so proud of him. But the book is available wherever you buy books. If they don't have it at your Barnes and Noble, tell them to order it. But it's definitely available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, everywhere else. I'm working on a book now. I've had so many friends who have struggled with kids who are have mental health challenges, bipolar, schizophrenia, and the way the system does not help them. You know, if they're a young adult, they can tell their parents, no, you can't show my parents my mental health records, but they need the help. So I'm working on a story. It's called his working title is Beyond Justice, where a young man who's a first year college student all of a sudden has a crisis and is diagnosed as bipolar, and the issues and difficulties that the family has trying to get him help. It's like the system almost works against you. And people always say, well, why don't you write a nonfiction book? If I wrote a nonfiction book, you would not read it. But if I wrap it in a good mystery, you will pick it up. So I'm educating you through the back door. And so I'm working on that. And I wrote about a book called Law of Karma, which is all fun. It's about a guy who has to make some tough choices about what he'll do for somebody he loves. And I'll leave it at that. And then I co-wrote a mystery with a friend of mine, Dwayne Alexander Smith, called Sounds Like Trouble. And the first book in the series is Sounds Like a Plan. And this book has been optioned by CBS. I'm hoping we actually get to see a TV series, but we'll see. I've had books optioned before, and we'll see. I try not to get too excited, but I think this one might actually happen. So we'll see.
Well, Anybody's Daughter should, once you read it, it needs to be
I know.
a movie as well. Okay, question and answer, Carmen.
Hi there. So Tony Wallace wrote, I am a judge that works with CSE youth in a suburb outside of Houston, Texas. I would like to purchase your book to give as a gift to these young women. On Amazon, there is a young adult adaptation for your novel. How does this version differ from the original version of your novel?
Okay. The young adult version is shorter and sort of because people are women, a lot of mothers like, oh, I don't want my kid to read up. So I just kind of tried to make it more for the, I don't know, 11 to 13. I wanted a young adult version, but I think particularly for girls who have been in the life, I think the adult version, the has a red and blue cover that you're looking at would be the appropriate version for most people, but not the young adult version.
Okay,
And
good.
that the judge, just so, and those that don't know what CSEC is, what she actually works with is sexually exploited children. So kudos to you, Judge, for the work that you do. And you will see, if you have not already read the book, of how this book really is going to parallel, I'm sure, with a lot of the cases. Okay, Carmen, what else you got?
Another question. It says, Anybody's Daughter is number two in the series. Is book number one the same subject matter?
No, no, it's not. And I'm trying to think because it shouldn't be listed as it's. Oh, no, 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 definitely not. Girl, with 16 books, I get confused. No, the first book in the series is uh I'm drawing a blank. It's not Buying Time. It may be Buying Time. Oh yeah. So but this is totally different stories because they're series but not sequels. So you'll find Dre and Angela in the book, but there will it will be a totally different storyline. So no, it's not a continuation.
So the book that they should get should either have the cover that we're
The
looking at
blue, it
right
should
now.
look like this, the blue and red, like the background on our screen, not the one that has green on it. This is the book. This is the full book. Yeah.
Then there
Carmen.
were a couple of comments. I love the book. Somebody said, not a question, just wanted to add that young boys and men are being hurt as well.
That is so true. And we don't, you know, and we don't discuss it and we don't, and the information for me and Stephanie, you may address it, wasn't as easy to access as, so why is that?
So we know that men and boys are trafficked as well. Reason why we focused on the girls on this because that's what the storyline is about. But thank you so much because I think it is important to note that boys and men are trafficked as well. It's underreported because they don't report as much. One, there aren't enough resources out there for the boys that have been trafficked. And then two, there's this social stigma in society. So therefore they don't report or they won't be believed. But we do know it's happening. I've seen statistics that are as low as 3%. I've seen some as high as 36% of victims of human trafficking being boys or boys or men. And I think what's important, what doesn't get talked about a lot either, is familial trafficking. So I told you what the average age is for victims of human trafficking being between 12 and 14. When you talk about familial trafficking, meaning that people that have been trafficked by a parent, a grandparent, a caretaker. When you think about familial trafficking, the average age range is 5,
Mm,
but we do know that there are victims that are infants or 3 years old. I've worked with young ladies who were trafficked by a grandfather or a mother, and they were as young as 4 years old. And the reason why it's so young for those for familial trafficking is because one, they're not going to tell. Two, they're afraid to tell because of the power dynamic between the parent and the victim. And then if they tell, where they're going to go, if they tell, they're afraid of getting in trouble. And where you will see, unfortunately, the infants is, you'll see that on the dark web. You'll see it in pornography because it is actually, unfortunately, it's a genre. Any other questions do we have? We have about 3 more minutes.
I want to quickly add that I love book clubs. I meet with book clubs all the time, free of charge. So if you're in the LA area, please check out one of my books and invite me to your book club meeting. And if you're outside of the LA area, I can Zoom with you, book club meeting with you via Zoom.
There you go. And I want to say that the Western area has 61 chapters, and that includes Texas,
Oh,
New Mexico, Hawaii, Alaska, of course, California, Oregon, Washington. So that we've got quite a few states. And again, this is an activity that Links chapters can do. And because this is a part of awareness and it's that collaboration piece as it pertains to the arts. Just also for people to know, I've asked all 61 chapters to take a picture. This is Human Trafficking Month, to wear blue, to take a picture, put it on their website along with the national hotline. So we're looking for 100% collaboration, and you have a due date of February 30th. So there's still time. Anything else,
Yeah,
Carmen?
one more question. If there's a recording of this webinar, may we use the recording to share with others outside of Links?
Absolutely. And it's being filmed on live. It's filmed live on YouTube as well. So you'll be able to find it on YouTube.
and I want to just say, I want to reinforce there is no such thing as a child prostitute. They are sexually exploited children. And I really want to encourage you to watch that Netflix documentary, Hot Girls Wanted. You will, because that gives you some insight into how easy it is to traffic a child.
And as you please let us know when you finish this book, because we have a facet that within our facet that zeroes in on the issue of mental health. And so please let us know when
I
you finish
will.
that one. Carmen, any closing remarks?
No, just thank you so much. This is really eye-opening. And I have seen a few scenes of the Netflix show that you mentioned. I couldn't watch it. I mean, it was just, I couldn't. I probably did 20 minutes of it or so.
And that guy in that series actually called my friend with to curse her out, to say, because she wouldn't send her niece's birth certificate. So the brazenness of it, I just think it's important for people to understand how real this is, and it can happen to anybody's daughter.
Mhm. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you, guys.
Yes, thank you for spending this time with us.
Okay, good night.
Good
Good
night.
night.